This week we hit a big milestone in the Grow at Home cycle, especially if you have been studying with us since June. This week we finished the first 6-month section of the Grow at Home cycle, completing our study of the Old Testament books and events. This week we will finish the Old Testament books by looking at Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. We will finish our study of the Old Testament Bible events with passages from the book of Esther. And our Bible teachings this week will look at Luther's meal prayers and explanation questions about the Bible in general. Our 10th minor prophet is Haggai, a prophet after the Jewish exile in Babylon, who urges the returning Jews to work on the unfinished new temple in Jerusalem. Haggai tells the people that if they have time to fancy up their own houses, they should definitely find the time to complete God's house. Even though this temple won't match the splendor of Solomon's temple, Haggai promises that the glory of this house will be greater in the future than at the beginning, because this is the temple that Jesus will one day come to and offer himself for the sins of the world. Zechariah joins Haggai in encouraging the people to finish building the temple, but he does this by recounting his visions of the coming Messiah. In the first 6 chapters, we read about Zechariah's visions, like the angel among the myrtle trees, the measuring line for Jerusalem, and the crowning of Joshua the high priest. The final 6 chapters include some well-known prophecies about the coming Messiah, like Zechariah 9, verse 9, which sees the Messiah entering Jerusalem on a donkey. Chapter 11, verse 12, which sees the Messiah being betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. And chapter 12, verse 10, which says, "They will look on me, the one they have pierced." But that piercing will open a spring to wash people of their sin and impurity. The last Old Testament book is Malachi, a prophet who continues to warn Judah of the consequences of their sin, even after the exile. In the first 2 chapters, Malachi points out Judah's past and present sins, like offering polluted sacrifices, accusing God of injustice, and not offering God the full tithe. But chapters 3 and 4 look forward to future arrivals. "See, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and fearful day of Yahweh." We'll soon see how John the Baptist was the Elijah who was to come, who prepared the people for the coming of the Messiah himself, Jesus Christ. We briefly discussed the book of Esther back in August, week 4. But this week we look at 4 events from the book. In Esther 2, we read about the Persian king's search for a new wife to replace his exiled queen Vashti. Many women are chosen to participate in an elaborate beauty pageant to win the king's affections, and Esther, a young Jewish girl, is the one finally chosen. But at the urging of her protective cousin Mordecai, she keeps her Jewish lineage a secret. In Esther 4, Mordecai brings to Esther's attention that the king's wicked advisor, Haman, has plotted to destroy all the Jews. He urges Esther to make this plot known to the king, saying, "Who knows if you have attained royalty for such a time as this?" Esther knows that approaching the king without being summoned has severe consequences, but agrees to Mordecai's wishes, saying, "If I perish, I perish." In Esther 5, Esther approaches the king, but rather than revealing Haman's plot just yet, she invites the king and Haman to a feast. Haman gloats about being personally invited by Queen Esther to a feast, but he is still disgruntled over Mordecai and the Jews. So his wife and friends tell him to construct a tall gallows to hang Mordecai on. In Esther chapter 7, Esther offers her second feast for the king and Haman, and then reveals to the king Haman's plot to destroy the Jews, which includes the queen herself. Haman literally throws himself on the queen to plead for mercy, but is accused of assaulting Esther. When the king learns of Haman's gallows intended for Mordecai, the king orders that Haman be hung on the gallows instead. The account of Esther and Mordecai shows us God's work in preserving his people, so they can one day fulfill their mission of bringing the Savior for all nations into the world. Our Bible teachings this week include the meal prayers Luther included in his small catechism. The first asks for a blessing before a meal. It quotes part of Psalm 145, reminding us that the food we are about to eat is a blessing from the Lord, and we trust Him for our sustenance. The second prayer is a prayer returning thanks after a meal. This quotes parts of Psalm 136 and 147. These verses remind us to thank God for all His goodness to us, and to use the health this food provides to live lives of service to the God who has redeemed us. The explanation questions are the first 4 in our catechism, dealing with the Bible. Question 1 tells us what sets the Bible apart from other books. It is God's inspired word. It is without error. It is sufficient in that it says all that we need to know to be saved. And it is powerful, able to work faith and fruit in our hearts. Question 2 says that the Bible teaches us who God is, how He wants us to live, and what He has done to save us. Questions 3 and 4 help us understand the key to understanding the Bible, the 2 main teachings of law and gospel. While they are both important, they differ greatly on what they do and how they are used. Spend some extra time learning question 4. It will help immensely as you try to understand what you are reading in the Bible. Join me in December as we move into the second half of our Grow at Home cycle, where we begin our exploration into the New Testament books and events, and continue discovering teachings from Luther's Small Catechism. Blessings this week as you remain in His Word.